This is the Unscripted Podcast. All right, we're back, and we're spinning the wheel today again.
Well, I figure we need to, since you ain't been around, where you been? We ain't had time to talk about our topics that we never talk about.
Yeah, been on a mission.
Where you been missioning?
Well, we've been down doing a little disaster relief down in Florida. It's a mess down there.
Like, how bad was it down there?
Well, I'll put it to you this way. We were 40 miles roughly north of where the eye wall hit. We were in Sarasota and Venice, and then a place called Inglewood, which is between Tampa Bay and Fort Myers. And there were massive trees down and roofs blown off of houses, and we're 40 miles north of where the eye wall hit. And we were on the – most time if you're on the east side of the storm, how we view it – they were kind of on the north side, right. Whatever, and so the storm surge was going out where we were at, and anyways, they were the whole time we were there, like pretty much people were without water, and they were without. I mean, they couldn't flush their toilets, and like the water. So most of these people are on well water.
Why couldn't they flush it? Because no power? No
power, but they had no way to and I didn't quite understand it either, but something was up with the sewer system, and I think that these a lot of the sewers that come out, they got those
peat systems in them, the peat systems that churn it and
everything.
And
so whatever you do, like if you got to take a shower, like all that's just going to go to where you got your stuff, and then it's going to start backing up towards your house. And so I don't know. These water company guys were running around like chickens with heads cut off all week. Like they were running around with flashing lights on and running here and there. And sometimes I don't know if they were putting some. I don't know what they were doing. But I'm out there at one guy's place, and I'm like, so you digging a hole out here? And he's like, you gotta have somewhere to put your poop.
He's making a latrine.
Yeah. And so, anyways, it was just I've been to a lot of those disaster zones, but this one, people were not only without power, but they were without water too for a long time. So it just opened up doors of opportunity. We were able to cut some trees and give some fuel to people, and ice. That's been the latest upgrade. I bought one of them. I bought a deep freezer to put in the back of the truck. Mm-hmm. Run that thing on a generator. Mm-hmm. Man, people are going 4 days without electricity, and you're like, hey. You need some ice? You have ice? Right. We got a 16-pound bag for you, right. As many as you want. So,
how did you buy it somewhere and bring it in?
Yeah, we bought it up above in Ocala. We stayed a night in Ocala on our way down. And
your brother lives in one of them little towns, doesn't he?
He lives in Orlando.
Okay.
Or Orange, West, I don't know. I've never been to his house. But anyway, he lives up around Orlando, and we stayed in Ocala. So it was pretty neat. I was, of course, we weren't going to make it. We were going to roll in at like 11 o'clock at night into a place where there's a curfew, and I didn't know where I was going, no electricity in the town. So it's like.
Got that big old trailer.
So figure so we're searching for a hotel on the way down, and found one, read the little reviews, whatever, get booked in, and I had to quit going with the mentality going with the cheapest, because the cheapest ends you up, where bed bugs are.
Yeah, right. You also end up with one of them pay by the hour places.
Exactly, and the patrons that are in those
That's
places.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, there's a reason why you pay by the hour.
So, so I got a little more expensive place, but we were like 2 blocks up from where the lowest place was at. And there was no parking I couldn't park the trailer. We're rolling in there at 11 o'clock at night, so I couldn't park the trailer in the hotel parking lot. So they're like, you can park at IHOP across the street and across the little side street. So I was like, man, this is sketchy. Like we'd already saw like 3 people walking and 2 people on bicycles going by, and I'm like
toting 2 chainsaws.
Yeah, and the hotel's okay, but I got a generator and all this stuff in the back of the truck, and I got it cabled and locked. But still, I mean that's
keep honest, man.
Right?
Yeah.
So I called the police department and the talked to the dispatcher, and I said, so is this what's the crime rate like? Is this a good spot to park? She got, well, I technically can't tell you that, but I wouldn't park my car there. Oh, good.
Why can't they tell you that?
I don't know. She's just, I didn't ask. I was just kind of frustrated at this point. I said, well, can I talk to a shift sergeant, you know, so I can get a special patrol? So I called him up.
What's that mean?
To where they're like, okay, I need you to patrol this area particularly tonight. Like, so if you go out of town, you can call the Forest County Sheriff's Office and say, hey, we're going to be out of town for a week. Can you guys stop in and check on our place, you know, here and there? And so they're just.
They'll do that?
Huh?
They'll do that?
Yeah, they'll do that.
Have you ever done that before?
Not here, but I mean, we used to do it all the time. I assume Forest County would do that, but plus it's good for like some of them cops. They're like night shift. Like, okay, I can find me a driveway that I can kind of park
take
in
a siesta.
Yeah, take a little siesta. But so I called up the sergeant. And he's like, look, man. He's like, that's not a good spot to park. He's like, you know, if you got another car in the area, like you can park at the PD and then like come back and get it. I was like, I have no way of getting it. He's like, I tell you what, he said, I'm heading in. He said, he said, meet me at the police department. I'll drive you back down to the hotel. So that was cool. And then at 7 o'clock in the morning when he got off work, he picked me up at the hotel and took me back to go get it. So we got to park beside the U.S. Marshal Command Center. They'd had their stuff.
So you pretty much
there.
left the keys in the ignition.
Almost, yeah. I mean, I had no worries from that point.
Right.
And
you slept sound.
Yeah, and then I got to talk to him a little bit about his faith, and so that ended up working out pretty good. And but so
that's handy info to know, though. I would have never thought about those things. I'd have had like Aiden and Liam and me like running routes.
All right, one of y'all sleeping on the toolbox.
11 to 1. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna sleep. 1 to 3. You're gonna sleep. You know.
Yeah.
Sit out here with the ARs. You know, like Chuck Norris style or something. You know, one in each hand.
And the lady at the my biggest problem is I'm a worst case scenario thinker. And then
Bob, you were a cop, so you've seen the worst case scenario.
And so then that's why my wife is such a helicopter mom too, is because I come home and Courtney, she can keep a secret. And so I taught her like early on in my career, like, look, if I'm gonna share something with you, like you can't share it. So then I'd share stuff with her that didn't matter if it got out, and she wouldn't share it. So anyway, so she knew a lot of you know, crazy things that went on. Well, if I ever vented to her, like she knew the worst of the worst. So like she knew all the child death stuff, and so like I just made her a bad helicopter mom. So like anyways, but so I'm a worst case scenario, and the front clerk girl, she's like, I'll keep an eye on it, you know, when I go out to smoke, you know. Well, it's like, man. So my thing is
so thankful for these Marlboros.
No, but like,
what was I supposed to watch?
I saw this video where these, you know, these self-defense things or whatever. I can't remember the name of the YouTube channel. This guy, he just analyzes videos where somebody had to defend himself or whatever.
Oh yeah, I've seen those things.
And so he's like, these people were going to deposit, you know, $45,000 in the bank and they get ripped off. You know, well, what it was. No, they were going to buy something at a jewelry store for $45,000, and so the bank teller who had gotten the money out called up her boyfriend and said these people have $45,000 on them. So I'm sitting here thinking, okay, the store clerk, I'll keep an eye on it for you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Right. So anyways, it worked out for the
Jimmy. Come on down.
Yeah, it worked out for the best, but it was really good. We were able to minister to like to 30 families. Cut like 43 trees and gave ice to different people, and then now I had a
cup of cold water.
Yeah, that's right.
Ain't that what Jesus said? Mm-hmm. There's just something special about a cup of cold water.
Yep. And it was a blessing. Like I'll show you one couple, and I don't want to show everybody or whatever, but I'll pull it up on here. Let's see. I need to go to the screen share, and then. So this one couple right here. So this is the kind of the sheet for this lady. We just cut a little palm for her, and like she wouldn't let me get off the tractor before I got to hug her. She was like,
"The palm trees cut pretty easy."
No, hate them. They're palm plants. If you got a palm tree, you need. I mean, if you're gonna cut a palm tree, like charge extra. They're horrible. That lady's from New Jersey.
So she's doing with them like snow bunny.
Yeah, they're snowbirds, whatever.
Yeah, snowbirds.
I asked her. I said, "Ma'am, can I use your restroom?" Because we'd cut in her yard and did all this, piled up all that stuff back there behind the tractor, and then cut a fence off of her well, and
Like a fence had turned on it?
The fence had fell on her well pump.
Oh.
And so we cut the fence and got it off.
But they got shallow wells anyways, don't they?
I didn't ask. But she's like, I'd let you use the restroom, but like it's not working. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, she's like, well, I'm just kind of timing like when I go to restaurants. I mean, that's just kind of like you got all this stuff going on in your life, and now you're having a time when you're going to go to the restroom based on when you're going to go visit a store, you know?
Yeah, man. That'd be and think about the stores.
Being a bind, she's like, my brother who's visiting with me, she's like, he's, he can go wherever he wants. And this is the truth. That's a blessing.
Right.
Help that guy do that with gas. But these two people right here, they were from Germany. It was her mom's house. And I rolled around the corner. Of course, you can see all this pile of debris in the back, but there was this pretty good-sized tree that was down. And this guy had a 16-inch chainsaw. And,
oh, man.
And he did not look like he knew what he was doing. He was running one hand and, like, holding the hand up on the limb.
Oh, Bob.
I said, Carson, this guy's fixing to kill himself.
Right.
So, anyways, we rode up there, and they were from Germany. It's her parents', I guess, vacation house or something. And
they buy a place in Florida?
Yeah, but it was like, I mean, we were in, all we did is we just picked, I asked the churches, like, who needs help? And so wherever church members were, we would go there and then take care of them and then.
Just branch out.
Well, yeah. And then it's like, we'll work for their church. We're with their church, whatever. And so anyways, it was cool, but they were kind of neighbors right there. And, so I got to ask them, I cut one limb and my saw shut off. I'm like, man. I'm sitting there trying to start my saw up. Well, then they walked back up after we'd already agreed to do the stuff. And
so can I use your 16-inch saw?
Huh?
Can I use your 16-inch saw? Mine ain't
no,
working.
they just we just started a Bible study because I was like, so y'all believers in God? He's like, eh, and then so we were able to do some apologetics and stuff. But he,
that most of Europe is a post-Christian society.
Yeah.
So it's a reasonable assumption that most of the groups that I'm in on that I don't really fool with it much, but that I have participated in before and that have a lot of Europeans in it and Australians, anything somebody mentions about God or something like that, they just trash them. And most of Europe, they'll just look at it like we look at like the Cajuns with their witchcraft or something like that, and so that's the way they view most of that to us. And he was probably just he's figured like, I'm not going to upset this old boy,
right. Well, it ended up. I don't know what happened. There was probably more seeds planted with her than him. She was pretty interested in it. He didn't seem to be too interested even.
Well, maybe he was the sharpest tack in the shed. If he's up here, like physics would have told you don't cut trees like that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But anyways, it was really good. They ended up. They were like, kind of those type things, and then I've got most of that study on a GoPro because I had it on my head and that conversation and things, and then they ended up admitting in the thing like, well, yeah, that's got to be God or whatever, but then it's like, now let's get this tree taken care of, kind of. So who knows? Anyway, seeds are planted, but so it was a fun trip. It was good, and anyways, that's the powerful thing is now there's we tried to be real diligent this time. I get in such a hurry, but we were praying really to God for him to just wherever he wanted us and whose lives he wanted us to be in, and to keep Satan out of it. And it was really good. But the powerful thing now is we tried to I try to be real diligent about my documentation with everybody and taking that extra 10 minutes and jotting down stuff about them. And I spent a couple of hours yesterday morning compiling all the stuff with the local preacher, one of the ministers at the church, and they were having
contact information. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, all their contact, and then kind of the groundwork that was done, and then so now they were having an elders and ministry meeting today about these people. So that was really good.
What church was that?
The South Trail Church of Christ in Sarasota, Florida. And then there's another church that's right there in Venice. And so I didn't get a picture with one guy, but I was talking with Gage yesterday. We had a Bible study and the first night, and then he he's like, yep, me and my girlfriend, we want to go check out the Venice Church of Christ. So who knows what'll happen. But all right, so we spinning the wheel.
Yeah, let's spin the wheel.
All right. All right, what you got?
So the wheel is rigged, I believe, because it spins the same number close by all the time. But I got number 17.
Oh, great. All right, here you go, Chris. Here's your question.
How do you get rid of the newest preacher in the church?
No. Why do babies die?
Oh, man.
Yep. Why do babies die is the question.
Man.
So for those of you who are new to the podcast, we hope that you'll look us up. You'll like, subscribe, do all that stuff. And then also pose a question, or leave us a comment. But also, so we asked our church about to submit questions, and they submitted 55 or so questions for us. And so, at times on the podcast, we'll put those questions in. And so that's the question is. Number 17 was why do babies die?
So I think this is a 2-part question, and maybe we could break this up over 2 podcasts if it's okay. But the first one I think is the why, and then the what happens. You understand what I mean? In
a sense, yeah.
So
I mean that's kind of a broad brush a little bit.
It is, and what I mean by that is like when they die. Where do they go?
Where do they go?
What happens to babies?
And then how do I pick it up? Because that's another thing. How do I pick up my life from here?
Yeah. And so maybe we can address the why this time, and then because I think it's just Chris that if we end it with the why, then it'll be a very cold ending. Because they need to understand what comes next. But God, you've done these but God things before, and I was listening to. Steve Higginbotham yesterday, and he was talking about, who that is? Preaches at Carnes, right, where the preaching school is in Knoxville. I guess there's something really ugly in Knoxville. I'm trying to picture what it is in my head, and I just can't.
You talking about that orange color that's number 6 in the nation right now? That's undefeated.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, go big orange.
That's what it is, and. But I was listening because he was diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah,
and
that just got him an even bigger following on his social media.
Yeah, what was crazy was like they told him because I don't keep up with it that much, and I'll just admit that. So I wasn't aware of all this stuff that went on, but they diagnosed him with cancer, and they said like 3 months.
Yeah, I remember that. Now it's like 4 years later, 3 years later, something.
Yeah, well, it's something like that. 2, 3. He told it on this thing, and because there was a hospital in Knoxville that could perform, or maybe one in Knoxville, some hospital that he could go to. That the guy won this Nobel Prize for immunotherapy, right? So essentially, they treat it on a genetic level instead of like with
instead of a number 8 shotgun, they're shooting with a sniper.
Exactly. They're not chemo or radiation or something like that. They're using, like, on the genetic level, they're attacking it, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, here he is, like, bumping along, no problems, Yeah. And so it's just a really so I was listening to him talk about the first thing that he said when he got his diagnosis was he was like going through like 3 or 4 points, like when tragedy strikes or something like that. And it was like, the first question is never ask the why. And he said, here's a good word study sometime. And I remember you preached about this a while back, or you used this in a sermon. And he said, just study sometimes. And his wife apparently is a good writer. And I say that like, I don't mean to sound like disrespectful. I've never read one of the books, but she's writing a book called But God. And so she's studying all the But God statements in the books, in the Bible.
Yeah.
And so he was talking about But God. And you can't write, you can't speak the why, because he said, one of the things he said is, I never ask God, why is this happening? Because I'm never going to get that answer. It's not like there's going to be God's not going to say, Bob, this happened to you because of this reason. He doesn't do that.
No.
As a matter of fact, God only talked face to face with a very, very
few people.
Very few people. And I mean, like, count them on your hand.
Yeah.
I mean, he even told Moses, when Korah, Dathan, and Abiram were trying to rebel against Moses, he said, I talked to Moses differently than everybody else. I talked to him, as it were, face to face. All the prophets, I speak to them in dreams and visions. You remember Joseph was dreams.
Daniel.
Daniel,
right.
Visions and dreams, right? All these things. These are great prophets. But Moses, God spoke to people face to face, as it were, very few times.
Right. And some people, just a little side note, some people get confused. They're like, well, why did Moses then say no one can see my face and they'll die? So it's not. So I have to explain that to kids sometimes. And
it wasn't that God come down and like, let's powwow, Moses.
Yeah,
you carved me in for 5:30.
Right.
That won't.
And it wasn't that he saw his face because no man could see God's
God
glory
talked
and live.
to him.
But he came and spoke to him
vocally, like at the bush.
It's
right?
going, hey.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, let's talk.
Exactly.
The one to FaceTime.
Right, an email, not email.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
but so God, spoke directly to Moses.
Very few wise.
Very few people.
We get very few wise in the Bible. We get no apologies. There is no single time that the Lord says, I'm sorry this happened to you. Because if for him to say sorry would imply that it
was outside his will,
that he didn't see it coming, right?
Yeah.
And so, why do babies die? I think that we need to answer that question, and then the what. What happens then? Why? Because we won't be able to do it justice if we just end with why. Yeah,
and and on this podcast too, like we're not trying to, it's like. Why do we get this question? But this could be a real somber and depressing type question. But you're probably, if you're somebody in the faith, you're going to get this question from somebody who's a non-believer in God. And so we want to give you some tools and resources for you to be able to answer that question. And I'll kind of start off with this. One is Job. Job lost his everything,
including 15 minutes,
including his children, And when those things happen, one thing that Job never knew is he never knew why, but he knew the who.
That's right.
He knew God. And with all these challenges and all the questioning of his friends and all these different things, it wasn't that he'd sinned. It wasn't that he had did something to cause this. It was just that God allowed this to happen. And
let's define that.
Yeah, it wasn't that God cast a spell and said, I'm gonna make this happen to you. It's the fact that
or God looked at both scenarios and said, let's see what happens with this one.
Let's see what happens with this one. In fact, Satan had come to God, and he's like, and God's like, have you considered my servant Job? Like, how he walks upright and all these things. And Satan's like, you put a hedge around him. Like anybody will walk with you if you put a hedge around him. And he's like, okay, well,
then take it.
I'm giving you permission, and I'm going to show you what true integrity is, Satan. And, God has some... He had a lot of faith in Job, and there was a lot of evidence evidently in Job's life that God could see that he knew that Job had it in him, that he would remain faithful.
Babies die. And that's probably one of the most shattering experiences, that babies die.
I can't imagine it. And, I've been ministering with two different families over the last 2 weeks, one that lost a husband to suicide, and another one 2 years ago, a mama lost her son to suicide, and it's a challenge. But one thing about it, just kind of to earmark this in for Christianity, is bad things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people.
And I think that's an important principle to understand. Is that we forget. Now, so anything that seems cold that we might say in this, clinical, what I mean by that, it doesn't mean, because sometimes we speak matter-of-factly, and it's never meant to imply that there's no emotion behind the statement. But God sends the rain on the just and on the
unjust. Allows the sun to rise on the good and on the evil.
So what we're saying then is that there are blessings of God that are enjoyed by everyone. That are enjoyed by every single part of creation.
And it says that he's no respecter of persons.
And so, but because of that, there's a challenge. and that is that. Let's turn to Romans chapter 5.
Yeah, so if you become a Christian, you look at Christianity like, just because you become a Christian, I mean it's explicitly stated that you're gonna endure hardship. You're gonna go through suffering, and so good Christians get cancer. Good Christians lose children. Good Christians lose their job. Good people, bad things can happen. Romans chapter 5.
Yep. So Romans chapter 5 and verse 12.
Go ahead.
There's a gem in here.
I love diamonds.
Our Calvinist friends would try to use this verse to justify that inherited sin. Mm-hmm. And we've done a series of podcasts.
The Tulip, check us out.
Yeah, the Tulip series. So if you have any questions about that, just go back and search your YouTube or Facebook, whatever, for the Tulip series. But Romans 5 and verse 12, there's something that happens here. We recount the garden story, and we remember that Adam and Eve sinning in the garden. God banishes them in the garden. God tells Adam that through the sweat of your brow, you're going to work, right? So God set Adam in Genesis 2 in the garden to tend and keep. He was always going to have to work.
Always going to have to work.
But it was going to be a perfect day of work, whatever that meant. I don't know.
Just like this weather's been.
Dude, I'm telling you.
Getting up and walking in the morning at 50 degrees.
Yeah, riding my Harley, not like I'm riding in the oven with the bed bugs. I mean, what do you call them?
Love bugs.
Love bugs, and digging them out of my teeth and beard, right? But the love bugs are a prime example of what happened when we left the garden.
Right.
Because then you have the challenges of the world enter in. What I mean by that is that, read Romans 5 and verse 12. Therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sinned. Because of sin entering the world, all men would die. Mm-hmm. Because they no longer had access to the tree that was of life. Mm-hmm. They no longer. So what had to happen then was death and disease would spread through mankind.
Yeah, and Scripture tells us that tree of life that was in the garden, God's talking to himself, and that's Jesus in the Spirit. He's talking to him. He's saying, "Hey, we need to get man out of the garden, lest he reached out his hand after he'd sinned and take from the tree of life and eat and live forever."
That's right.
And that tree of life we see in Revelation that it's in heaven.
It's in heaven, right?
And so today, that's where ultimate eternal life is. So death entered the world because of sin, and because because mankind has sinned, there is something in our genetics.
Yeah, we've been genetically polluted.
Right.
So what I mean by that is that as time goes on, and we could have a whole series on apologetics and
and we will sometime,
the flood and the genetic transformations of mankind. But just for a nutshell, just because why do babies die? Mm-hmm. We'll just say this, and we'll cover this at another point. That'll be tune in and keep up with us. But because we're going to make this statement, and we'll support it later. But because sin entered into the world, it's literally changed the landscape of the way humanity lived, breathed, and died. And so because of that, nobody gets an expiration date when they're born. Nobody gets a date that they're going to live until. Mm-hmm. Everybody just gets that they're going to be an end. Mm-hmm. Job said it. Paul said it. Naked I came into this world, and naked I came into this world with nothing, and I'm leaving this world with nothing. So everybody's going to come with nothing, and they're going to leave with nothing.
Right.
And so, back to our question, why do babies die? Well, babies don't die. Nobody really dies, and we'll cover that with the what. Okay. So I want to give you hope. We want you to have hope in knowing that babies really don't die; they just go to sleep. Mm-hmm. But why does tragedy? We paint the question that's asked, why do babies die? They're talking about the tragedy associated with it, because this is a tragic thing.
Yeah, and that's the and we don't want to be. This is kind of one of them moments where, we don't want to be cold or seem to be cold, because yes, we understand that loss. I mean, we've cried with these people,
absolutely, and many tears.
Yeah, and it's a big struggle. But for the unbeliever in God, babies do die. For the believer, the one who has hope in their identity in Christ, we have a true anchor in Christ, which is true hope, living hope, so we have there's life after this, and so we understand that now that those babies, even the aborted babies, they're with the Lord.
So the question really maybe is not why do babies die, because babies die because they're human.
Mm-hmm.
That's the clinical answer. Babies die because they're human. All humans die. But the question is, really, I feel like people asking, why does God allow tragedy in our lives? Isn't that really the question they're asking?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because when we think about a baby dying, we think like we had a funeral for a member that was 95 or whatever, years old. Okay, and there was a lot of people there, right? But you have a 16-year-old kid that dies.
Oh man!
I mean, the church would be packed. I've been to funerals before this was the first time I ever went to a funeral where we had to go into the basement.
Yeah.
Was when a teenager died. You know, this was the first one they set up
pack them on the walls.
A video, the old big fat, because the tragedy associated with it, right? So we go back to this question: why do men die? Why do babies die? The question is, why does God allow it? And why does God allow tragedy? Well, do you think when people say things like, I've heard preachers, I heard Don Blackwell talking about one time after he had his accident,
mm-hmm.
and he said that people, when he was talking about how to deal with tragedy, when people are trying to help, and he said, I had many people come to me and say,
it's just God's will.
It's just God's will.
No.
It was never, if it was God's will that I would have broke my back in a four-wheeler accident, then none of us would have ever walked. None of us would have ever walked, because God is no respecter of persons.
Right.
So it wasn't God's will. It was that we live in a fallen world, right? And so what we go back to this question is then this. It's like in John 9. Let's can we look at John 9?
Yeah.
John 9, now as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi,
who sinned?
Who sinned? This man?
Or his parents?
Or his parents. So that he would have had to sin, literally. This man was born blind from birth, so he had to sin in the womb some kind of way. Or
what's the reason? How does somebody draw some logic from that?
Yeah,
right?
Or at some point in development, right?
Yeah, right.
I don't know when he was. At what point his eyes.
I don't know at what point did a baby kicking their mama or making them have heartburn or
making
it's not sin, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so Jesus answers that neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. And I must work the work of him who sent me while it's day. The night's coming when no man will work. As long as I'm in the world, I'm the light of the world. So just break down a couple things we got here, right? Neither this man sinned nor his parents sinned. Nobody did anything wrong here.
Right.
This guy was just born that way. We have genetic mutations about us, right? We have these genetic things that Jesus was probably born shorter than all of us. He was all the people from that region at that time weren't very tall people.
Except Ben.
I thought the same thing. And so but Jesus says, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. The works of God. You can look at this as this man was cursed by God, or you can look at this and see that God can be glorified in this situation.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Ephesians 2 verse 10 says, we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works. And in Romans 1 and verse 20 talks about how that we're without excuse, being understood by the things that are made. Like his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. So we all look at tragedy and we go, well, how is this or why is this? It's not God's will that somebody has a chainsaw accident, all right? But they had their free will to pick up that chainsaw or leave it there, or to get training with it, get experience with it, learn something from it, or whatever.
And I'm going to tell you, baby is a subjective term.
Yes.
Because I had a member of our congregation who said, my baby boy just died. It shouldn't be fair that a parent should bury their baby. His son was 72 years old.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
He was burying his son, his baby boy, who was. It's not fair
years old,
that I'm burying my baby who is 72.
Right.
So this idea of why do babies die? It's a subject. Why does God allow tragedy? It's not that God allows tragedy. It's that we're human now, and there are things that happen to us as human. Now, I know, like I said, that's going to sound clinical and cold.
Sounds clinically cold. But here's this. Whenever I roll into a congregation with a disaster relief, and have a conversation with them, it's real foreign to people. But what they don't understand is that yes, this is I guess quote unquote tragic. That now we've gone from a first world standard to
in the physical sense
to a third world standard, because not everybody has electricity right now or running water in their home. But what you have is an opportunity, and that's what Jesus is talking about. But that the works of God should be revealed in Him.
Do you think it's tragic that those people's homes, that the dude is digging a hole to poop in? Man, it's been years. I mean, like, it's been years since I dug a hole to poop in. Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And if I had to go back to digging a hole to poop in, I mean, we would do it. I know how to do it. Yeah. But that'd be some kind of tragedy that would have to befall us for that to happen. Right. But we look at this, and you know, I know we can't compare digging a latrine to losing a baby. Right. I read a story of what happened down there, you know, because I didn't know you were going to. You sent me that message when we were having our financial thing. Right. And so I was looking up, like, what was the damage level and stuff like that. And Chip and I were looking. There's like 70-some people died in this thing. Yeah. Last count I saw, maybe more than that. But let me tell you a story about one thing that happened down there. There was a family from New Jersey that had came down. You may have even seen this story. It was on Fox News. They came down. The hurricane starts blowing over top of them. They get a bed sheet, tie themselves together in this bed sheet. You understand? It's like 4 or 5 of them tied together with the bed sheet because they're scared it's going to suck them out of it. They watched it peel the roof off, right? They tie themselves together. They're levitating in the bed. You understand? Mm-hmm. It drives a nail over the housetop then into this lady's what's the artery right here called? Femoral.
Yeah, whatever. Her artery, yeah.
The one that right near your heart, it drives, they're lashed together. It drives a nail into her heart. She's spraying blood on the people that she's lashed to. I mean, she's seconds away from dying at this point. You understand? I mean, like, there's no saving that, you know? She dies lashed to those people together. You may look at that and you think, what a tragedy. Mm-hmm. And what a tragedy that is for that situation. And man, how do you look at this and say that was God's will for a nail to come over the rooftop, stab you in the... I mean, it's like a scary movie type thing. Mm-hmm. Well, that never was God's will. It was never God's will for man to suffer or die, period. It's because of sin has entered the world. Is why. So you can... When people are asking the question, why do babies die? Why would God allow it? It's not God's fault. It's Satan's fault. Mm-hmm. You should really see who your enemy is. Hate your enemy. Hate the one that caused it. He's the one that hung the carrot out there for Adam and Eve, and he's the one that's hung, and we want to blame them and say, he's hung the carrot. You've done it too. Yeah. He had a perfect batting record.
We've all sinned and fall short of the glory of God.
It was until Jesus until he had a perfect batting record, and he's had one since. So he's batting like .99999, you know, on down the list, right? But it's not God's will. It's Satan's will. You know, see, 1 Peter 5:8 says the devil is a roaring lion, walking about, seeking who he can devour.
Yeah, the John 10:10. We're right here. If you got your page up, and the thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. That's Satan's thing. Yep. Jesus, I have come they may have life, they may have it more abundantly. Well, you can have an abundant life on this earth. You can have a very productive life, but the abundant life ultimately he's talking about is life beyond this fallen world of sin. Yep. He's talking about this life that's eternal, that's forever. That here we're on this test, and this is a fallen world that we're in. This is a sin-sick world. This is a world that ultimately that German, when I was talking with him about things, I said ultimately our problem. He was real interested. I said ultimately our problem is sin. And that's when things started. That's when the study started going way downhill.
Yeah, that's when we got to go back to cutting trees.
That's right. And that's the hard thing for people to grasp.
So I want to make an analogy with this. Then you think about this scenario when in John 11, right? John 9, Jesus, they ask him, why was this man born blind? Why did this happen to him? I want to look at two things, and I want to come back to John 11, okay? Let's look at Luke 17.
I muted the speakers on the computer. That won't affect anything, will it?
I don't know. I mean, is the road thing still bumping up?
Yeah, we should be good. All right.
And
all right, where are you going?
And Luke 7, 13.
Luke 13.
Yeah, there's another scenario that plays out like this.
Yeah. Jesus said, hey, the Tower of Siloam that fell on, were they worse sinners than anybody else?
Yeah, look at Luke 13, verse number 1. There were present at the season some who told him about Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. And Jesus answered and said to them, do you suppose those Galileans were worse sinners than all the other Galileans because they suffered or allowed such things? I tell you no, but unless you repent, you'll all likewise perish. Or those on whom the tower in Siloam fell and killed, do you think they were worse sinners than all the other men who dwelt in Jerusalem? I tell you no, unless you repent, you'll all likewise perish. So the guys that the Jews hated because they had offered a polluted sacrifice,
right?
They despised them. Do you think they're any worse than the guys that the tower fell on? You know that everybody, when the tower fell on those guys in Siloam, they're like, what a tragedy.
Yeah, everybody, it's like they all knew that story. Jesus would tell them something that was relevant.
Yes.
The people who died in the hurricane, were they worse sinners than anybody else?
That's right.
No.
The people who died on 9/11, were
Right.
they worse sinners than anybody else?
No.
No, absolutely not. What he's trying to get them to see is that we've all got the same problem. The problem is not what you see. Like I show up and I got briars in my face. Why do you got briars in your face for? Because thorns are stuck in it. No, you got briars in your face because you were in their bushes.
Yeah, you went through the briar bushes.
You were in the wrong spot. That's why you got briars in your face. So you go back to this scenario in John 11. Okay? So John 11, you have this thing that happens. Jesus needs to teach a very powerful lesson. And this will be the one that kind of sends him to the cross, essentially. So in John 11, I'm just going to hit a few high points on some verses here,
sure.
Okay, just to make my scenario. John 11, let's see here, verse 3. Therefore the sister sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, who you love is sick. When Jesus heard about his sickness, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of Man may be glorified through it. So, verse 7, Jesus said to a disciple, let's go to Judea again. The disciple said, Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, and you're going there again? Purpose, right? They're trying to say, why are you doing this, Jesus? Well, I got a reason why I got to do that. Same thing in verse number 9. Are there not 12 hours in a day? If anyone walks in a day. Same thing he said over here in John 9. I must work the works of the Father while it's day. You got to work while you got to make hay while the sun shines. We got to go do this thing. Now, verse 11, these things he said after that, he said to them, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up. Lord, verse 12, if he sleeps, he'll get well. Jesus spoke about his death. They thought he was speaking about him taking rest. Then Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. Lazarus is dead. I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. Now, Jesus goes there. Jesus has this powwow with Martha at first. So he gets there. Martha comes running to him. Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, he'll give you. Your brother will rise again, Martha. I know that he'll rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I'm the resurrection and life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. Whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? We got to ask ourselves this question.
And that's what Jesus said. Do you believe this?
We've got to ask ourselves this question and answer it. Do you really believe this? That Lazarus will never die. He tells her he will not die. Though he looks dead to you, he's not dead.
And that's a pinnacle point for everybody.
Absolutely.
If you don't believe this, then let's go study the things that will help your unbelief.
That's right.
And if you do believe this, then everything has to change in the Christian. But the way that we respond to everything, it all changes. Your life will change. Your vacations will change. Where you spend your money will change. How you live your life, the way you raise your children, what you do is all going to change.
Now look what happens. Yes, Lord, I believe that you're the Christ, the Son of the God who came into the world. And follow this line of thinking. When he had said these things, she went away and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, the teacher is come, is calling for you. As soon as she heard that, she quickly arose. Then Jesus has this conversation with Mary now. Then Mary came where Jesus was. Lord, if you'd have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Same thing, right? Martha tells Mary, you need to go talk to Jesus. There's something going on. Lord, if you weren't here, my brother would have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in his spirit and was troubled. Why was Jesus troubled for? What troubled him? He said, where have you laid him? They said, Lord, come and see. And Jesus wept. Jesus didn't weep because Lazarus was dead. He'd already told them they were dead. He wept because they just didn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
He wept because they just didn't understand. And more importantly, he wanted them to understand this is the most powerful thing that we can understand. I love that babies really don't die. I can make that statement plainly and boldly because Jesus said it right here. Babies don't die. Tragedy happens, but babies do not die.
And don't turn this podcast off yet. We're saying that out of compassion.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's because of this thing. And if that sounds clinical or cold, I don't mean it to sound that way. I say it with the most compassionate way. If you have a baby that's gone, it never died. It never died, and here's why. Let me show you this.
We want you to have hope from it.
And Jesus, let's see here, verse 39. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, Lord, by this time he stinks, for he's been dead 4 days. And Jesus said to her, did I not say to you that if you would believe, you'd see the glory of God? He asked her, do you believe it? I told you, if you believe it, you'll see the glory of God. Then he took away the stone from where the dead man was laying, and Jesus lifted up his eye and said, Father, I thank you that you've heard me. I know you always hear me. Because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe you sent me. Now when he said these things, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he who died came out bound, head and foot, grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, loose him and let him go. Bob, I want you to understand how much Mary understood this question now. She watched her brother. She said, Lord, if you'd have been here, he would have never died. And he said, Mary, I'm going to show you the glory of God. This doesn't happen often, but I've got to make a point, and I'm going to use Lazarus to do it. Mary got this point so much, Bob, that I believe that's why in John 12 you see her break her alabaster flask and anoint Jesus' head, because her body then meant nothing to her anymore. Her life meant nothing to her anymore, because the grave, they had Lazarus' grave dug. It's not like they can hone out a spot in the rock. They had the spot they were going to put him in. I grew up my whole life, Bob, getting off the bus beside the spot I'm going to be buried at. When I became a Christian and I went to my first funeral for a Christian, I understood something profound then that I never thought about before, that my tomb, my grave that I walk beside every day will just hold my body.
Amen. The
reason why Satan wants you to sin in your flesh is because that's the only thing you're not going to carry with you. And that's the only thing he can catch you against here. When Mary watched Lazarus walk out of the grave, that flask that she was been saving, so people could come see her when she was stinking dead, so she could put it on herself, so people could come see her dead body.
The anointed body, yeah.
They wouldn't need that anymore. I'll never need that again now, because my body is nothing to me. I watched Lazarus walk out of the grave. See, tragedy. And I'm sorry for the tragedy, and it brings tears to my eyes to talk about it. I'm sorry for the tragedy. I've held people who've got the report of cancer for themselves or for their babies. And I've held them, and I've prayed with them, and I've prayed to God to take it away. Because the reason why I pray those things is because I don't want the tragedy in their lives. Because I'm so scared.
Yeah,
that they'll walk away from the Lord.
Yeah, it'll make their faith waver.
And I don't ever want to see that happen. And that's why I don't want tragedy in people's lives. But we've got to be the kind of people that can say, and it's hard, buddy. It is hard. But once Mary watched Lazarus walk out of the grave, a whole lot of questions become a whole lot clearer for her then. How I'm going to live my life, what I'm going to do. If we really believe that babies don't die, it's going to change the way we live our lives.
There's two verses here that are powerful that you brought up. And I had a cancer patient. You know, it's pretty, both of us, it's pretty neat. Both of us had preached on John 11, in the last, I don't know, eight weeks or so. But this, the fact that John 11 verse 4, when Jesus heard that, he said, "This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." John 9, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. And the glory of God can take the worst tragedy that we see, and he can turn it into glory. If you don't believe that, look at the cross. It was shame. I mean, everybody today looks at the cross as being something that's they see the glory in it. They see the power in it. But it was that old rugged, horrible pain, death. I mean, it was the death place. It was the shame place. And the Romans, they would come in and take over a country, and they'd say, you can either pay taxes. We just defeated your army, and you can pay taxes and live under Rome's protection, or you can rebel, and we'll strip you down naked, and we'll hang you. We'll make a public spectacle of you outside the city. And so what's your choice? So God, he took something that was meant for evil.
Excruciating, Bob. You notice where we get the word from? The word excruciating. When you say excruciating, you know what you mean by that? When something's excruciating, that means it's the worst that I can think of, right? It's a word that I use to talk about the worst thing. It's the same word that we get from, it's a Latin word that means out of the cross. Ex cruz.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Out of the cross. The worst thing. Excruciating.
Meant for evil, used for good. And that's, so whatever situation that you're in today, just know that Jesus said from someone who was blind, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but the works of God should be revealed in him. And you can see why do we get old? I mean, I always try to tell older people in the sermons, like every time they walk through those doors, you're telling me how important it is to you. When you're in excruciating pain and you're coming to be with the Lord's people, you're preaching a sermon that can never be told through words and never validated. But you're validating those things with your life. When you're blind and you're still seeking God, when you lose a child and you're still holding on to your faith, like you're preaching sermons to people that it's just outside the norm. And those are powerful, powerful things. And so when you get cancer, and this is something after I preached that sermon in John 11, that this verse right here, verse 4, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God. How can the glory of God be utilized in this? And that cancer patient, they told me, thanks for the reminder, because how can I use my cancer to bring other people closer to God? And so why do these tragedies happen?
So I want to read a verse, and we can close with the verse. How about that? Is that okay?
Yeah.
So Solomon in his study of indulgences, he writes the book of Ecclesiastes. In Ecclesiastes chapter 9, in verse number 11, it says, I returned. I done spent all my time. I've done it all. I've lived the life of indulgence, and I returned and saw under the sun. Well, the race is not to the swift. The battle is not to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the men of understanding. But time and chance happen to them all. For man also does not know his time. Like a fish caught in a cruel net. We look at the net and we think, I get to eat. The fish looks at that net completely different than we do. The bird caught in a snare. I sure do like eating birds. That bird in the snare says, I'm in a worst possible situation I can be in. So the sons of men are snared in an evil time when it falls upon them suddenly. So you see that the fish, well, it's feeding us, but to him it's a mess that he's in. We can look at our lives in that way. That you see, babies, it's a tragedy. It's an absolute tragic situation and an emotional turmoil that it causes the family. But we can see the glory of God in it if we really want to. So next time we'll talk about the what, because that's where the hope is at. Where's the what for the baby, for the tragedy that comes?
This is the Unscripted Podcast.